Welcome back, Camden Catholic. What time we got right now? It's about 6:53. We're going to go ahead and bang this stuff out before you even get to school because you have a map quiz today. Dun, dun, dun. And we're going to focus on getting that done, kind of push forward, do what we got to do, etc., right? So, anyway, we started talking about in class the High Middle Ages, right? And we talked about how, like, if you look back at your notes, and we were talking about the early Middle Ages, you'll notice that we don't have much of anything there, right? You're like, well, like, for the early Middle Ages, all we have is the stuff about, like, Clovis and Charlemagne and, like, well, here, the thing about it is not a lot happened during the early Middle Ages, right? The early Middle Ages, that period from about 500 to 1000 AD, is the time period of just trying to reconstruct, right? Trying to get back to what you were originally. Now, are you ever going to get back to the glory that was Rome? Nah, like not really. All right, so, and that stuff happens, all right? It just happens. So, big thing is, though, getting into it, the High Middle Ages was a period between 1000 and 1300 when Western Europe began to emerge from what Petrarch coined as the Dark Ages. Some of you are like, who's Petrarch? Is that a kid that sits in the back corner of our class and is quiet? No, he's actually an Italian Renaissance writer, but don't worry. We'll get to him later. Good stuff. All right, so anyway, but looking at this picture right here, you can tell that things are starting to get better. Agriculture is coming back, right? Let's talk about, like traits of the High Middle Ages, right? Traits of HM, right? So, first of all, agriculture is on the rise. Agriculture on the rise, right? We got that going on for us. Yeah, agriculture's on the rise. We also have the fact that church power is growing, right? Church power growing. And we also have the fact that basically, government's returning. You know what I mean? Government's returning, right? So we got stuff rising, we got stuff growing, and we got stuff returning, right? So complex government systems are finally returning, right? So, but going forward, though, getting further into it, the big dispute was between these two properties, right? Between the church power on the rise and government's returning. Because here's the thing, popes and kings, some of y'all already have this, but I kind of mixed it up a little bit in a couple of different classes. So if you already have something in your notes, don't write it down twice. Just kind of skim over and be like, oh, we talked about this already. You know, because my class is completely different. Third period's so different from seventh period, even though, like, you guys don't like each other and stuff like that, but it's whatever, but y'all learn differently. So I kind of popped around a little bit. Now, popes and kings during the early Middle Ages and nobles and their knights, they had a great deal of power, right? During the early Middle Ages, the nobles are going to control most of Europe, right? Due to the fact that kings were actually basically just your most powerful lord. But you would listen more often to your local lord more than you would a king because you didn't sometimes even know who that guy was, right? So now getting into it, though, that's during the early Middle Ages, right? Over time, though, the power is going to begin to shift from the nobles to the kings and the popes. Powerful kings are coming to power in places like England and France, and then there's going to be some tussling back and forth between the church and those people, right? So, because here's the thing. The church considered itself the most powerful secular power, right? So secular is an extremely important word. I need you to draw a star next to the word secular, right, on your notes because it is massively important. Secular means on earth, exists here, right? Non-secular is like the kingdom of heaven. Christ, like faith, right, is a non-secular thing. Whereas secular powers are your president, your king, your government here, right? But the Pope considered himself and the church considered themselves to be supersede the governments that of even man, right? So that's going to like create a lot of power struggles when this stuff starts coming into play. Papal supremacy. Very important word also. Star it, underline it. It's huge. It's crazy, crazy important. So popes began to claim this thing called papal supremacy because they had the supreme power over all others because they believe that they can teach, preach, and translate the Bible. Some of you are like, but Mr. Terry, the Bible's written in English. Why do they need to translate it? And then like somebody like Omar is probably raising his hand right now. He's like, because nobody can read and write. That's a part of it, Omar. But the bigger part of it is the church also only issued biblical texts in what language? Very nice job. Rihanna, I heard you. Latin, right? It was a fallout from Rome, okay? So the fact that like following the Great Schism, right? Following the Great Schism in the Byzantine Empire, when the Catholic Church was relocated to Rome, right? So, and then that means that the former Roman Empire's biggest impact on the Roman Catholic Church is all of its text is going to be written in Latin, right? But here's the problem. Most people don't speak Latin, right? They were called barbarians for a reason. They couldn't speak Latin, right? So, going forward with that trait held on. They couldn't speak Latin, right? So, the church kept the text written in Latin to make it so people didn't have the ability to read it on their own. Also, because that was what the popes at the time had decreed, that it stay written in Latin, right? So, keep going forward. Then you've got, all of this stuff, right? Look at all this stuff. Look at all that. Look at that. All right, so really quick, you'll notice that we have already talked about a couple of these different places, right? We talked about the Clovis, right? That's Clovis land over here. We talked about the consolidation of the Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne, right? That's his territory right there. There's just some Christians right here. You have the Muslim empires in North Africa and southern Spain right here. You got the Byzantine still doing its thing. We talked about them already. The Papal States, really quick, just to give you a heads up, that's just the country of the Roman Catholic Church, basically, right? So the Papal States belong to the church, right? Just jot that down in your notes. Papal States belong to church. But there's a couple of places that we haven't talked about yet, right? Out of this entire map, right, because you should be ready for your map quiz today anyway, what is one of the most powerful countries that exists in Western Europe today that is not highlighted in a color that we're all just kind of wondering, what the heck, when did they become a country? Very, very good job, Braden. England, right here, right? So what we're going to get into, am I getting into it now? Yeah. What we're going to get into now is we're going to talk about the establishment of England, right? Because we've already talked about France. We've already talked about the Holy Roman Empire. Now we're going to talk about England, okay? And we've already talked about the Byzantine. And so we've talked about the big powers that are growing up in Europe during the High Middle Ages. Well, England had its earliest roots back in the early Middle Ages, right? When these people called the Angles and the Saxons actually invaded England in the 400s and established their own kingdoms, right? Well, here's the thing about it. They are barbarians as well. So invading is an aggressive word. I'd say something more along the lines of push the Romans out or migrated in, right? Because if this is during the 400s, Rome is falling and its borders are receding, right? It's getting slower, it's getting smaller and smaller and losing more power every day. So they're going to divide into separate kingdoms originally, but the thing that's going to happen more than anything else is the fact that they're going to breed together and create what you would call Anglo-Saxons, right? Each have their own laws and customs, but the thing about it is, there we go, England was subject to frequent invasions from the Vikings, right? So Alfred the Great is going to unite the Angles and the Saxons, creating the Anglo-Saxons to stop Viking advances, right? So Alfred the Great, very important guy, okay? So really, really quick, I need to give you a timeline on that. Let's look up really quick when Alfred the Great was in power, all right? So just to make sure that you have this, like, just so it makes a lot of sense, right? Because the Angles and the Saxons came in when Rome was still around, and Alfred the Great, all right? So you got Alfred the Great, who died in 899 AD, right? So you got about around the 900s AD, okay? So around 400 to 500 is when the Angles and the Saxons showed up, and about 400 years later, Alfred the Great is going to kind of establish the kingdom of England as you know it now to defend from these Viking invasions, right? So he is a Saxon king, and he actually kept them together, right? Now we're going to fast forward about 160 years when we get to class, when we talk about the Battle of Hastings and how France is basically going to plant the seed of a nation in England, right? So, but that's where we're going to stop for right now, all right? So I hope y'all have a fantastic evening. I will see you guys tomorrow, and yeah, let's get it after it, okay? Y'all have a good one.